Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute, but please take a second to answer the 2 poll questions that we have in the room. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Integration and Supervision of Peer Workers informational webinar. We are so happy that all of you could join us today. My name is Courtney Williams, and I'll be moderating this event for you all. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items with all of you. Please plan to listen in to the presentation via your computer speakers, or feel free to call into the phone line that can be found at the welcome and audio information box on the right-hand side of your screen. You will engage directly with our presenter and each other through the live questions and comments box. Please feel free to ask any questions there as well, and we will get to them during the discussion portion of the webinar. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please request assistance in that same questions and comments box. Our tech staff is reviewing your comments and will respond to your needs as soon as possible. The event is brought to you by C4 Innovations. C4 works to promote, advance, and improve recovery, wellness, and housing stability. As an organization, we are committed to reducing disparities and achieving equitable outcomes. We achieve this work by partnering with service organizations, communities, and systems to develop and implement research-based solutions that are person-centered, recovery-oriented, trauma-informed, and equity-focused. We conduct trainings, technical assistance, consulting, evaluations, and research for organizations that provide social services, primary and behavioral health care, and housing to marginalized people. For more information and to stay up to date on all things C4, please visit our website, c4innovates.com, to sign up for our listserv, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where we post regularly. As people were arriving today, we did post a couple of poll questions, so let's take a look. All right, the first one is, what is your role? We have about 27% of people in recovery, 39% peer support workers. We have some family members, medical providers, a couple of mental health providers, case managers, staff supervisors. That's awesome. And the other poll says, please state the setting where you are employed. So we have about 2 people at inpatient treatment settings, 26% of you are at outpatient treatment settings. We have a good number at residential settings, and a large number at peer-run recovery community organizations. That is awesome. I am so excited to announce today's presenter, Cheryl Gagne. Cheryl is a senior associate at C4 and has worked in the field of behavioral health for over 25 years as a clinician, researcher, professor, and trainer. And with that, I'd like to get us started and turn things over to Cheryl.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome. As I heard my introduction today and yesterday, it dawned on me that I can now say over 30 years. So that's both, you know, kind of exciting. I feel good about that. I've spent my whole career in behavioral health. First working as an addiction counselor, then working intensely with people with co-occurring conditions. And then 20 years at the Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation at Boston University with Bill Anthony, the father of psychiatric rehabilitation, who passed away last week, but left a legacy of hope for recovery for everybody with mental illness and substance use disorders. For the past 9 years, I've been at the Center C4 Innovations, and having a wonderful time training people across the country in a variety of topics, and primarily around peer workers. I have to disclose that I'm not a peer worker myself. I'm not certified. I haven't been through the training, So I am a person in long-term recovery from addiction and in recovery from a mental illness, and have supervised peer workers throughout my career since the early 1990s. I also want to point out that the term integration is sort of an umbrella term, and a better term might be involvement. You know, there's possible to have integration without high levels of involvement, and really involvement is the goal with peer workers in behavioral health systems. So I just want to set that as the foundation for today, thinking about integration or involvement as the foundation, umbrella term, and we're going to take a closer look at supervision and how supervision brings about a higher degree of involvement and integration. So today we're going to focus in on the principles and practices of peer support services. It's essential that supervisors understand the role. Ideally, the supervisor is a certified peer support specialist, certified peer recovery coach. We understand that often in the real world, there may not be peers working in programs who have been there or who have the skills of supervision yet. So non-peers may supervise peer workers, but it's essential that they understand the principles and practices. We'll talk about the essential functions of supervision, kind of what goes into supervision, and then explore kind of an application of recovery-oriented approach. We have a couple of issues that came up and we'll ask you to respond to as supervisors. You can put that hat on. Even if it's make pretend and you're not currently a supervisor, you're very welcome to participate in the exercise. So we're going to ask the first question. Bina, please, does your experience with, okay, you've responded. Thank you, Bina. Let me view the votes. No. I'm going to end the poll. Has everybody voted? The question is, and you can see it right next to the slides, your level of experience with peer support services. Okay. So I think, you know, there's a wide variety. And again, the group here, very diverse group, that's exciting. Some people are themselves certified peer support workers. Others are very new to the field. Let me scroll up to see where the most people are at. Oh, so about half of you, and this is really big, half of you currently supervise peer workers. So that's great. And organization, people who work closely with peer workers. So a real range, okay, thank you. A real range, but understanding that half of you are already supervising peer workers. Why we're focusing on peer workers, it's not that they're so special, you know, that they need super special treatment, but they are relatively new to the behavioral health care system, and they fill some unique roles. And I shouldn't just say behavioral health, because really peer workers have made incredible inroads in all of healthcare. It is true that supervisors may not understand peer support well enough. A couple of webinars like this may not be sufficient to give people sort of a sense of what peer support is all about. Often the organization or the program may not be aligned with recovery-oriented values. And so that is problematic for some peer providers in terms of their code of ethics and their recovery-oriented focus. We know that providing supervision does really promote good practice, ethical practice, increases worker satisfaction, and that's across the board. That's not just unique to peers, but good supervision in services promotes satisfaction and good practice. There has been research that's shown that supervisors play a key role in integration of peer workers in a workplace and promoting, bringing about changes, promoting recovery-oriented workplaces. And that leaders in the peer-run recovery community organizations, so many peer workers are not working in sort of traditional behavioral health settings, but rather peer-run organizations, which typically are grassroots, you know, building the plane as you fly, so to speak, and they may not have the infrastructure or skill set to be able to provide high-quality supervision. And so maybe need some, you know, training and technical assistance to structure a supervisory program. So that's why we focus on it. What's unique about peer workers is that they do provide non-clinical supervision, non-clinical recovery support services, as opposed to the more clinical, treatment-oriented. And by clinical, we're really talking about symptom-focused. You know, clinical is a treatment word. The goal of treatment is to, you know, reduce symptoms, right? Recovery support isn't about reducing symptoms, but enhancing wellness and enhancing function, right? Let the treatment people focus on reducing symptoms, but how can we enhance wellness, enhance competence in the world? And that's more what peer support is about. So it's like the other 99% of a person's life, not the symptoms, which is clinical. Peers do follow a different code of ethics, and there are really clear ethics. And I have an example of a good code of ethics in the download pod for you. But one of them is like non-coercive. There can be absolutely no coercion in the interactions. They can't be a part of that. High degrees of respect. There is a unique skill set in practice, which often revolves around sharing personal experiences with another person, which is not part of any other professional practice. And the bottom line is that peer workers, people in recovery, but particularly those who are filling roles as peer support providers, have to contend with stigma in the workplace. And let's break down stigma to recognize that stigma is, the foundation is ignorance, right? Not having the right information or proper experiences to see clearly. So there's ignorance, there's bias or prejudice, these kind of hardcore, sometimes subconscious beliefs about differences, so bias. And then there's outright discrimination, and those are practices that have a negative effect on one group or another. And people in recovery from addiction, from mental illness, are contending with stigma in the workplace. Okay, I have a question. I posed a question. I don't know if everybody's answered about their experiences with supervision. Anyone else need to answer? I'll give another minute. Okay, a couple people still voting. Some people aren't voting. It could mean you're sharing a computer. Please assure it's a anonymous poll. Go ahead. I'm going to end the poll now. All right. So I'm going to scroll. No one else. So there, about a fifth of you have never supervised nor taken a course in supervision. That's a good time for this webinar because it kind of just sort of gives an overview. About another fifth are supervising but never received training on it. And that is very, very common in service industry. I mean, it's just when you get promoted, oh yes, and you'll be supervising these 5 people, never having a course in supervision or training. Very common experience. There's about 10% of you who are skilled and experienced, and over half who are very skilled and experienced, and who continue to strive to improve their practice. And, you know, I think if we did this survey even 5 years ago, it would have looked a lot different. So I feel inspired by that half of you being, you know, experienced and skilled. Please feel free to put comments into the chat box as well as we go through the presentation. So I want to talk about supervision as a it's a professional relationship, all right, not a friendship. It's a collaborative activity between a supervisor and worker in which the supervisor provides guidance and support to the worker to promote competent and ethical delivery of services and support through the continuing development of the worker's application of acceptable professional peer work, knowledge, skills, and values. All right, that's a mouthful, but it really captures what a supervisor does, and it captures all the functions of a supervisor. First and foremost, being collaborative suggests a real partnership, that you're both on the same team working together. There are many of us who came to work and supervision with the unfortunate experiences of having anyone in authority being a frightening person. So being mindful, we'll talk about trauma-informed supervision, but being mindful that people don't show up to the supervisory relationship with a clean slate, that we bring ourselves to the relationship, and even the idea of collaboration may be something that takes a while to really demonstrate and model with a supervisee. And we know that, you know, the benefit for peer workers, and again, the benefit for all workers of supervision is, you know, that supervision does provide an opportunity to reflect on the practice. You know, did I use the right skill with the right person at the right time? Like walking through that, having somebody who's skilled and knowledgeable about peer practice is essential. Delivers better outcomes. That comes from kind of exploring those work issues. Maybe I'll try it another way next time. Certainly enhances problem-solving skills. Supervisors are great at presenting us options, another way to think about it, and options for strategies. Certainly improves clarity and objectivity in decision-making. You know, supervisor is another set of ears who can objectively reflect on whatever's being brought. Ideally, supervisors empower, motivate, and increase worker satisfaction. And understanding that empowerment is all about, you know, teaching people the competencies or giving them the confidence to do things for themselves. So empowerment is not really just this lofty idea, but it actually manifests in people being able to have their own agency and be able to navigate, whether it's a system of care or a workplace. Empowerment is about giving it away. So if we look at these basic functions of supervision, you can see that, you know, there are kind of three categories of work that we do, three buckets of work. And all the while, we're using these competencies of inspiring, teaching, modeling, supporting, challenging, evaluating, collaborating, which should be number one, and advocating. All of those competencies and fit into these buckets. So of administration, and that's like getting it done. That's the kind of task where you're checking things off lists. You're, you know, very important function of supervision. Helps the person navigate, make sure they, you know, get their time sheet in, make sure their workload is balanced. So administrative function is very important, and some people are really good at that management administrative function. The formative function is the, you know, teaching, modeling, challenging, helping the person grow as a professional. So formative is really about development and so key early in a person's career. Actually throughout a person's career. It's wonderful to have a supervisor who really helps you grow beyond where you are now. And then finally, the supportive function. And that is, helping the person be a little more resilient with the workload and response to work and, supporting them, listening, praising, frankly. So those are the three kind of buckets. Now, if you look at those, administrative, formative, and supportive, it's a lot to ask for a person. There's such different sort of skill sets within those. It's hard, it's hard for a single person to master all those buckets. And so you'll find as a supervisor there may be parts of it that you're great at and parts that you struggle with, and I think that's a lot of it. Sometimes organizations will kind of spin off the administrative, and that's where you get your one-to-one sort of checklist supervision and have a group of a real cohort of people who are doing the same job to do formative and supportive together. Some organizations are lucky enough to do that. In some organizations, they have helped peers get the formative and supportive supervision outside of the agency, in which they, work with a peer-run organization to provide the kind of training and support, ongoing development. So there's a lot of ways you can meet the functions and deliver adequate supervision. So, I went into too much detail on that slide because here I elaborate again. So again, this will, administrative supervision, this is the quality of work, workload, liaison to everything in the company. This is the thing I'm worse at, I have to say. This is the part that I'm terrible at. I wouldn't want to supervise anyone if I were the only one doing the administrative stuff. So those are the tasks there. Formative supervision, though, and that's really focusing on professional development. And there are ways to do this for no cost within the organization. Having a learning lunch one day a week or one day a month where people are taught how to do something. What is it? Lunch and Learn, I think is what they're called. But it's really about increasing, skills and maybe shifting attitudes, providing training. And then supportive supervision. Often it's also giving feedback on work, lots of praise, but also areas for improvement and discussing people's reactions to their work. What has the impact of that been? You validate and provide encouragement, promote self-care practices. Again, this has to be universal. You don't want to single out peers are the only ones I talk to about self-care. And when we look at like best practices in supervision, we have to think about a universal application because they are best practices in supervision. They're not best practices in peer supervision. Okay. Often we'll use the term recovery-oriented, trauma-informed supervision, and how do we think about supervision in this way? Well, there's a lot of overlap between the two kind of foci, but I'm going to just elaborate a little bit now. So recovery-oriented supervision, again, it's a collaborative process, so it is supervision that fosters the professional development of a person in recovery, and it's strengths-based, so really highlighting the core strengths of the person, empowering, teaching, and helping people do for themselves, super respectful, growth-oriented, really belief in the potential of everyone to grow in their profession, and that it's mutually directed. Over time, that you're more of a team, that you're really, it's not you're not pitted against each other, but rather can look at the program and mutually kind of see what is needed. And that may be an aspirational goal, certainly at the beginning, in the first few weeks, months, maybe even years of a person's work, but over time, that's your aim. I always think of recovery-oriented work as whether it's supervision, whether it's counseling, whether it's case management. If you're recovery-oriented, your job is to work yourself out of a job, right? To make yourself obsolete, that over time the person will learn, that you're transparent enough and you're teaching along the way. And that's recovery-oriented. Trauma-informed supervision is a collaborative, safe relationship that fosters the growth of people who have experienced trauma. And again, I would bet that most of us, rather than think about only people diagnosed with PTSD, if we make this a universal approach, it's not going to harm anyone. Recognition that trauma is ubiquitous and that people are in authority, which unfortunately supervisors are often seen as a person in authority. Authority is a common trigger for people with, post-traumatic stress disorder or for many of us. Providing the essential ingredients of sort of a trauma-informed approach of safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness. This is really important in a work environment, that transparency, honesty, demonstrating trustworthiness. Once again, empowerment, working yourself out of a job. So here's our, did I have another question? No, after this. So right here is our exercise. So a scenario that comes up. So Alton is a certified peer specialist, recently hired to conduct educational groups and to provide individual support to people hospitalized at a small state facility. Get the picture, inpatient groups, individual connection. Alton has great interpersonal skills and connects and engages patients in educational activities. So they teach a wellness recovery action plan, they might do a little CBT, they might just do a little, goal setting together. Those are the groups. And he connects with people individually. You meet with Alton as a supervisor, and you want to review how Alton writes his clinical notes after each meeting with patients. Alton says, I don't write notes. Peer specialists do not write notes. It's against our code of ethics. Your understanding is that it is necessary that Alton write clinical notes. What do you do? So how would you respond to Alton? There's a poll here, anonymous poll. So only 14 people have in their 112 of you. So I'm going to wait a couple more minutes for more people to vote. Let's see. Thank you. Any more? Keep voting. This is not an uncommon problem or, something that comes up in programs. Okay, some people are typing in some comments too. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end the poll. Is where. So most of you said explore his objections to the documentation. Don't act, but just kind of explore what's behind it. And actually that is the first step. Explore with Alton the reasons for his objection to writing clinical notes. Once you understand that, well, peer support is non-clinical, peer support values confidentiality, that peer support, trust and respect are key. Are there ways within those guidelines that he could write those, following the code of ethics? Are there ways that he could write notes? So brainstorm with Alton how he might document the group and individual activities that aligns with his code of ethics. Many people are taught, well, I missed this comment, but yeah, some people are talking about training. Maybe he needs some training, right? And we've talked about it's really a balance. Like, yeah, it is part of the role. It is in his job description. It was in his job description. But can we make that happen in a way that aligns with his code of ethics and, you know, his current practice as a peer specialist? Write a non-clinical note with the individual or group. That could be the last activity to kind of summarize what they did together. You know, share the note with the group for approval or individual for approval. You know, might have to work with some colleagues to change the record keeping aspect of it. There's sometimes checklists that you have to do before you can get to the text. There may be some changes around that, the actual medical record. I know that's a hassle, but it may need to be done. Certainly some changes, perhaps in policy. May need to work with billing to find out what kind of language is needed for a particular billing code. So training may be important, but, you know, bringing into the conversation his code of ethics, his quandaries about writing a note, brainstorming ways of doing it without stirring up his concern about confidentiality and non-clinical approach. All right, let's look at, these are some questions you can ask yourself when you're kind of going through those actions, and like, am I focusing on the strengths? Is what I'm doing empowering for both of us? You know, is it helpful to me to explore it and explore other ways of doing it? Am I respectful? Are we focused on the person's growth? And is the person kind of mutually or at least involved in directing the supervision? So here's another scenario, and there's no poll question for this one, so I want everyone to feel free to type in. So Serena is a new graduate from a peer recovery coach training. She had very limited work experience before being hired at your agency. In the first months of work, Serena missed or was late for meetings. She often seemed overwhelmed by work tasks. When you ask Serena about missing meetings, she starts to cry. She tells you that she's not using, you didn't ask, and that she's trying really hard. Her probationary period is ending, and you're unsure about whether or not you want to offer her a full-time position. Thinking about kind of recovery-oriented, trauma-informed supervision, how might you talk with Serena? So a lot of people are typing, and I'm happy to hear that. And understanding that there's not one right answer, that there may be many approaches that, you know, uphold the values of recovery-oriented, trauma-informed. Okay, we're still typing. Yeah, really identify her strengths, ask her what's going on and what support she might need. Great. Yeah, there's a lot of information missing, absolutely. It's hard to know. Does she have a mentor in the organization? Is she feeling lost? Okay. All right, so let's explore this in the next slide. So you assure Serena that you're not worried about her using. You're not saying that she's using. And explore the barriers. A couple people said that. What's getting in the way? What is the problem? What is the problem? You explore the barriers and try to strategize with that. You know, after exploration, engage her in brainstorming possible solutions. maybe Serena decides I'm going to set alarms on my calendar and phone for each meeting, giving me time to get to each meeting. You investigate other aspects of work performance with colleagues. Like I said, what are the strengths, right? Sometimes we're not aware. If we're supervising a lot of people, we don't work close together, we might not be able to, catch them doing something great. So we have to ask other people. Follow up with how the calendar and phone alarms, if that's working. A lot of times people who are new, older people over, say, 40, who are new to the workplace, so not have a facility with, Google Maps or Outlook, and so may need some true technical assistance. That's often a barrier. And people feel ashamed about those lack of skill sets, so they might not come to you. So that could be it. Several people talked about, exploring how her recovery's going, how she's feeling, do a RAP plan. These are activities that are outside of supervision. This is, it's not part of supervising a person to explore their recovery or what's getting in the way. Really hone in and focus in on the work problem. Being late to meetings, missing meetings, those are the problems. Hone in on that, stay on that. Now, it may be that there are things she needs to do in her self-care and in her recovery, but that is not for you to explore, right? That's a boundary that a supervisor needs to set, both with people in recovery and now you could plant the seed and say, do you have a wellness recovery action plan? Just curious, and ask them to consider it if that's something offered in your organization. I like this one. Someone said, I think it would be important to reframe her attendance not as a requirement, but as an opportunity. Yeah, to be on the same page as others, to make her feel included, that as a team you value, right? So it's not a failure. So the carrot rather than the deficit. Great. So, and again, assuring Serena that as her supervisor, you're on her team, you want to help her do her job well. A question came up yesterday with, I never wanted to hire peers because I would feel so bad if I had to fire them. I would worry that it would be bad for their mental health. And I do want to assure you that it is sometimes necessary to fire and, a worker. It's never a positive thing. It's always a very uncomfortable, painful thing, but, peer workers have been fired. They've survived. Many continued in the field, learned from the opportunity, and moved on. Okay. Last scenario. Okay, so this is Martin. Martin is a peer support specialist who's employed as a peer navigator in a very, very busy outpatient addiction treatment center that's located, embedded right in a community health center. He has over a decade experience providing peer support in the Peer Recovery Education Center. So the peer-run organization is very busy. But this is his first job in a formal health service setting. A couple of colleagues complained to you about Martin's behavior in team meetings. They say, and honestly you have observed this, that Martin will interrupt and insert his opinion. Martin is a large man with a beard and long hair and a loud voice, not the typical provider at the addiction treatment center. You want to talk to Martin. You'll have to give Martin some feedback. How would you go about this? How do you go about this? So I think we can acknowledge that it's awkward on many levels, but how as a supervisor would you navigate this sort of interpersonal issue? Someone talked about motivation. okay, as a team groundwork, right? If the team has some kind of behavioral expectations, ground rules, to sort of review those, that we wait till someone is finished, right? Sometimes, like in some teams, those rules have never been explicit, right? They're just implicit. We're all from the same culture. We all do it the same way, and they're implicit. And sometimes for people who are very new to work situations or, just a new environment, it's hard to read what's implicit. You have to make it explicit. Validate Martin for his input. Absolutely. You want to continue to amplify his voice, but talk about strategy. Yeah. Note the value of listening. Great. Good one. I love that. So there's a large man with a beard. I would dislike that. As a large man with a beard, I would dislike to be pulled aside and explain that there are expectations that everyone. I would like to be pulled aside. Okay, thank you, Joel. Nothing against large men with beards, but I put a context for you. A lot of behavioral health settings are, comprised of 70% women, and often. So let's look at some ideas for Martin. I think the ones you've come up with are great, very, very sensitive. And I would, start with advocating for Martin, like the two people who complain to you, and help them recognize have some compassion for difference, but also recognize the benefits of having someone different on our team, You want to try to get a clear, although you've observed this, you might want to try to get a clear image of what the problem was, to be as specific. If you're going to give feedback, you want to be as specific about it, accurate about it as you can. And then during a regularly scheduled supervision, give Martin feedback. You'd start, as any good feedback loop, start with Martin's self-assessment of his strengths and challenges. What's going really well for you, Martin? What are things you're not feeling great about or you'd like to see improved? Reinforce Martin's strengths. Only if you agree. If you don't agree, just skip this. You don't have to say anything. If he's saying, oh, I'm really good at team meeting, and I think you don't have to you skip. But then share your observation of the behavior. Martin, I want to bring your awareness to something I observed at team meeting. Yeah, you talked about it. You've probably noticed that others on the team wait until the other person's finished speaking. And then, you might talk about some cultural and organizational norms. Check in with Martin about, was it okay to hear this? Yeah. Any other comments or questions about Martin? Great. Yeah, highlighted strengths, absolutely. That is so important. It works with all of us, really, that is the most effective way to produce behavior change, is always positive reinforcement. And if you think about your career, like, you play with your strengths and you deal with your deficits, right? So people really need to know their strengths. I'm going to say a few words about integration of peer workers, that very often it requires not just really good supervision, but aligning policies and procedures. And here are some places where there are some rubs, if we say, where within organizations or programs, there may be some barriers for people who are certified peer specialists, certified peer recovery coaches, etc. So right from jump at human resources. So, often we do want to have people on our team who have an experience of criminal justice, because a lot of the clients, the people we serve, have experience with criminal justice. And That's an important point of peerness, and sometimes there are huge barriers to hiring people with a criminal history. So looking at that, or there are people we're missing right from the beginning because of the criminal history. Are we able to recruit people with criminal justice backgrounds? Educational attainment too, that for many people with, it may be a level of training where you're supposed to have a bachelor's, a level of job where you're supposed to have a bachelor's and the person doesn't, but lots of experience, and is there flexibility around that? Educational attainment also does not only make it more equitable for people with psychiatric and substance use disorders, but also, for people who come from impoverished backgrounds. So record keeping is also where things may be needed to change, and we talked earlier about, documentation and writing records. And then performance and promotion. For many people, peer support, peer recovery coach are careers with very little chance for advancement. And recovery is all about growth. And so creating opportunities for career advancement, and whether that's within the field of peer support, so somebody becomes very skilled at delivering educational groups or becomes skilled as a supervisor of other peers, maybe get some skills around project management, so that there are opportunities for people to grow into higher paying, more rewarding positions. So that career ladder, career opportunity. And then involving peers, and that's really the higher level from integration, is creating opportunity for connection between staff, working together, projects that you work together, having lots of opportunity. We know that the only way to overcome stigma is through kind of lived experience of being with the person. It's not enough to read about, recovery from mental illness or recovery from a substance use disorder to reduce your biases. But in order to kind of reduce prejudice, you need that connection. And so, creating opportunities has many, many benefits for the whole organization. Establishing opportunities for involving peer workers and leadership decisions. This whole concept of universal design. This became really important to me when I first started doing supported employment for people with severe mental illness, psychiatric conditions, way back in 88 when I was doing that. And the deal was that sometimes people with mental illnesses needed accommodations, small, no-cost, low-cost accommodations, but it was problematic because they were accommodations all of us want, right? Every single worker wants, right? Having some flexible hours, that flexibility was a big one, being able to juggle tasks. So thinking about kind of implementation around universal design for work. And what else? If we think about involving peer support workers in our organization, increasing the kind of, not just integration, but involvement. Yeah. Great. With the agencies in our areas, promotion inside the peer services is a challenge, and it really is. A lot of peer-run organizations have very limited budgets, and there's only room for one ED, and it's, it is a real challenge to grow within. But it may be, building collaborations with other organizations, a shared project where you could have some more management experience. Sometimes in this, people have to leave their agency in order to grow, right? You don't stay in one, workers mostly do not these days stay in one organization for their whole career. Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Having peers discuss their role with others in the agency sometimes it's often not enough to get like the intellectual information, but you really need sort of a heart talk about, the magic or the benefits of peer support. I think that is so true. So yeah, most people do acknowledge that career advancement within peer support is really hard. Now, there are some people who are currently peer support workers who do aspire to get another professional credential within the field, become a social worker but that's different. I think we should still support people who, and encourage people who want to go that direction. That is a way, but having a ladder within peer support is important. Yeah, developing projects and project-based work is really good for organizations in terms of sort of intra-professional collaboration. Sometimes organizations can become very siloed because the workers, outside your discipline, you never work together. Great. So these are wonderful suggestions. And I think this has given you a bit of a flavor of the learning community that C4 Innovations is forming beginning in September. Every other week we do a plenary session like this where people are very involved in the chat box. And alternate weeks we are in a small group, a group of 8 to 12 people, honing in on our own goals or, either organizational goals or our own sort of learning goals. So it is a 12-week opportunity, really interactive professional development to learn and begin to master some of the skills of supervision, enhance your understanding about the practice and principles of peer support, really understand like all the applications of peer support, maybe acquire some practical tools to promote peer support within your organization, so really promote that integration. And then the thing that people liked the most was connecting with others who had similar goals. So within the small groups, people often made close connections where they shared, resources and ideas and lots of empathy with one another about the advancement of peer support. So I know we have some questions, and I'm going to go to those now. Yeah, I think so. So here's where you can go for more information, and I think it's also in the download, the web links there. So don't worry, I'm going to click off this slide, but it's there for you. And now we'll take questions. Courtney?
Awesome. Yes, the application and the webpage. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The application and the webpage are in the web links box right above the chat, so you can download those there. And a couple of questions that we've gotten so far. Will you be going into things like intentional peer support in the learning community? Intentional peer support and how it relates to supervision.
Certainly. I mean, we don't go into intentional peer support discretely around how it's done, but we do present some of those models of supervision that, the reflective supervision practice, that peer support, that, the intentional peer support requires. And that is kind of a process that is kind of integrated within perhaps a larger piece of supervision, because there may still be the administrative piece of it that needs to get captured, but we can go into that.
Okay, great. Another question is, are there eligibility requirements for this? Is there a cost associated with it?
Do you want to answer this, Courtney?
There is no cost associated with this learning community. And
yes, sir.
Is that okay?
No, that's not. I better go with it. There is a cost associated with this learning community. There are actually 2 levels of involvement. So for folks who just want to every other week, like come to the plenary, fine, that's free. And you're very welcome. You can go in the chat box, you get any resources that we download. However, for those who wish to have the every other week in the small group with a skilled facilitator who knows the integration of peer support, supervision of peers, peer workers, there is a cost associated with that. I believe it's $500. It is not brass tacks anymore. You may know, and I think Courtney remembers when we were SAMHSA funded and were able to offer it for free. Those days are now behind us. So again, you're very welcome. And the reason why we have to have costs for the small groups is that we have to pay people to facilitate those groups. So that's what's associated with that. So whatever you can do, if your organization is able to pay, I believe it's $500, able to, provide this as part of your continuing education. It is a good deal, 12 weeks, lots of connection, and resources. So if you're able to participate in the small groups, that's wonderful. And if not, you're very, very welcome to be here.
Thanks, Cheryl. And yes, there's a whole bunch more information under the webpage and application, so you should be able to find a lot of that information there on cost, eligibility, all of that information. So would this be
and Alan
good
had asked
for those
I'm going to just finish up the questions on the learning community and then go back to some if we have time, okay? So would this be good for those with limited formal training? Absolutely. I mean, I think in other learning communities we had, everything from number of master's level clinicians to, people who had no college experience. So it isn't, there are a lot of resources, but it isn't a heavy demand for reading. So it would be good. So yeah, let me see. Will you be providing 12-week training? Will you be providing that? Yeah. So the question is, yes, I am providing a lot of the training with a lot of some of the other plenaries will be guest speakers who have way more expertise in particular areas. So we're able to offer that. We do address supervision challenges. I mean, that's what often comes up in the small groups is, working with supervision challenges. So no, the resources that are, so the question is, do you need to be part of the group to gain resources at no cost? Every plenary we have a couple of resources in the download pod for people that are yours for no cost. So of course, yes, you could download those if you come to the plenary. Now, there may be additional resources that the facilitators share with their small group. I can't promise those will all be posted, but certainly the ones at the plenaries you can. Okay, so I think we got all the questions that came in about the learning community, and certainly if you have any additional questions, you can email us about that.
Okay, we didn't get any questions from the chat on supervision, so if you all have any, please do pop those in there and we will get to them. We do have a couple of questions that we received beforehand. How can you do formative supervision?
There was one that came in, I want to just, there is one that came in that got mixed in. So working in a hospital setting, lots of stigma with the hospital staff, and how do you handle this? And it is really, acknowledging that it's there is the first step. It's really, it can be very overwhelming, and I think, that it's real, and sometimes within our service settings even more powerful than outside. Recognizing that, people within hospital settings tend to work with those of us who are most impaired, most disabled, and certainly the most disadvantaged. So it stirs up a lot of prejudice and biases, not just about mental illness, but it kind of all that halo effect, all gets glommed into that. So we're really contending with multiple layers of prejudice. And certainly, education, even if there's prejudice, I mean, sometimes with the stigma, you have to start just legislating interactions, right? So you're not going to shift attitudes, you're not going to shift beliefs, you have to legislate the interaction. You must demonstrate respect, and this is the language. So hardcore training about, anti-discrimination, right? So these are policies, these are procedures, this is how you interact, and having leadership who are dogged about that, like absolutely insistent of these interactions, because even if you cannot prevent the biases in the mind, you can determine the interaction. This is how we greet people, this is how we serve people. And sometimes that's where it needs to start. So sorry about that question too. That's a real heavy realization sometimes when we look at our workplace and we recognize like, it's so pervasive. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
All right, so it's right at 2 o'clock, so I want to be sure that I thank Cheryl so much for presenting. Okay. You're absolutely wonderful, and I want to thank all of you that were able to join us today. As a reminder, if you have not done so already, please sign up for our listserv at c4innovates.com and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube to learn about future events. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and goodbye.